So welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. Today on this show, we have the wonderful Kerry Rowland. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you are now the CEO of the Cancer Council South Australia.
That's right.
And previously, before that, the General Manager of Customer and Community Relations at Say Water.
Correct.
And also you acted on in the CEO role multiple times over your career.
Yes.
You were a previous boss to me at one point.
I was.
Which is why I'm probably more nervous than usual sitting here. It's like I am going for a job interview again or something like that. But no, great to have you on the show. I'm really keen to sort of start back where your life started in essence. And so I'm really interested, what do we need to know about your earliest context to understand the person who's sitting here in front of us today?
Great question. So if we go right back, I think one of the key things that defined me both in my personal and professional life is that I grew up in a family with a single mum and my two sisters, and I was the youngest of three girls. I still went and saw my dad every fortnight and have a really strong relationship with him, but my core family unit was led by a really strong independent mother, strong business person, and it taught me so much. And one of the things that I reflect on a lot about that is that there was no gender roles within my household. So I grew up with my mum just doing everything. So of course that's what I strongly believe that I can do is everything. And
Absolutely.
It was one of the really key defining things for me.
That's amazing. So let's just dive into your mother a little bit. What did she do? You say strong businesswoman. What was her background?
So business commerce.
Yep.
She worked for the Chamber of Commerce. She worked for federal and state government. One of her key roles was that she took delegations of people from Australia over into Asia in particular to give contacts for them to export their product into Asia. So yeah, a really strong role model.
Absolutely. And how old were you when your parents separated?
3.
3 years old. So
I know no different.
So you know no different. That's right. Is there a memory, I guess, that you look back on, like outside of the role modelling of your mother, and is there a memory that you look back on that you think, actually, this was pivotal towards me and my character today?
Well, that's a tough question. If there was a moment, or I think that I'll probably answer that on a personal level. And I don't think it was a particular moment, but it was the experience. So what's really important to me is that I have a really strong family unit. So both my husband and I came from families that had divorced parents, which is fine. We had very happy upbringings, but we wanted to have a different experience for our family.
Yep.
So we have a really close family unit that's more traditional in the sense that there's a mother and father and 2 kids, but we still instill in them the really strong values around you can do whatever you want to do. So I don't know if there was a pivotal moment, but it's just more of a feeling.
Yeah. So you got 2 kids?
Yes.
Girls, boys?
One of each.
One of each. Very good. How old are they now?
21 and 19.
And what's their names?
You got Elise,
Yep.
21-year-old, and Jack, 19.
They'll be listening in, so shout out to them. I guess talking about the gender-defined roles, how does that now play out in real life for you? What does that look like? You know, when because it is, I think you're right, there is something in that, in sense of who you are today. Yeah. What does that play out to you? Like even in your role as CEO within the Cancer Council?
So I'm happy to answer it in both contexts, professional and personally. So when I entered the workforce, I joined organisations that were male dominated. Didn't really think about it at the time and advanced through my career reasonably quickly. So went into a lot of environments where I was the only female in the room, but I was quite often the youngest. I probably thought more about being younger than I thought about being a female. And it wasn't until I became more of a leader in organisations that I could see that people, particularly young women that were working for me, had a level of reservation and their confidence was a little bit lower. And that's when I kind of recognised that not everyone feels the same as me. I don't see myself as a female in the workplace, but I do
just
know
a human in the workplace,
correct,
right?
on merit.
Yeah.
But I certainly felt that other people needed to be given the confidence to not feel that gender bias. In my private life, I and my husband share parenting. So I worked part-time for 10 years. That was a choice. But as my children came to the end of their schooling, our life was really busy. I've got a full-on job. My husband's got a full-on job. And it was just so busy. And he wasn't really enjoying his work at that point in time. And I said, well, just quit. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, we've got so much pressure in our life. Kids are at the end of their school. There's so much going on there. Just take a couple of years off and, do stuff at home. And he's like, okay. And it was amazing. And so not having these defined gender roles, if the house needs to have some painting done or the lawns need to be mowed or, dinner needs to be cooked, whoever's available does that. It's not defined gender roles within our home either, which is something that we really want to instill into our kids.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I come from an Italian background, right? So you can imagine after dinner what the table looks like. Yeah. There's the females are in the kitchen and the men sitting around the table still. And I try to break the mold in the sense of getting up and helping because I actually don't want my children. I've got 2 girls. I don't want them growing up thinking that that's their role in the kitchen. And I've actually had some family dynamics play out in this scenario where I'm like, then I'm not welcome in this world, or my kids aren't welcome in this household if that's how you're going to define. So I hold a pretty strong stance on that. So yeah, I think what you're doing is great. So kudos to you. Moving back into sort of the business aspect of it, what is a leader's role in this space then? Obviously it was a bit different in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, but we are in a world where people should be educated around the equality piece. What does it look like in your perspective for leaders today?
Yeah, so unfortunately some of that bias still
without
exists. Doubt. But for me it's about what you walk past you're willing to accept as individuals and as bystanders.
Yep.
And I'm very much around if something's happening that you're not comfortable with, you actually need to say something. So I think that's really, really important. But I also think that we need to set up our businesses to support everybody. Now that can be, you can talk about females, you can talk about the traditional roles that females had with dropping the kids to school, although a lot of that seems to have balanced out over time. But you can also look at it with responsibilities that people have for ageing parents and the like. So how do we set up our workforces and our policies that guide our workforce that actually enable them to get the balance right between their home life and their professional life? And I think that as leaders in organisations, we've got an absolute responsibility to, policies, procedures and all of that. You can get all of that put in place, but you've got to walk the walk.
Yeah.
And you've got to support it in practice. And that's what I think all leaders' responsibility is to give that platform to get the best outcome from your staff as well. It's all about driving staff engagement, incremental effort, all of those things.
There's a lot of, as you said, there is still that mentality still floats around. How do you walk the walk, though? How do you change the minds of those mentalities today?
So there's lots of different ways of doing it, but I think that the most powerful one is leading by example. So you can have it written in paper and say, this is what we believe. It might be in your strategy or in a policy. You've actually got to take action against that rather than just saying, let's think about it from a consumer perspective. Customers are at the heart of everything we do. We want to support people that are in financial hardship and the likes. Well, what do you do in practice?
Yeah.
And how do you make sure that you challenge the policies and barriers that are in place to get the outcomes that you need to do? So a really bit of a cop-out is to say, well, our policy says this.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to do that. Well, why? What needs to happen in society? What needs to happen with your staff? Well, how do I make that happen? Because the guidelines might be wrong, the policy might be wrong. I need to change that. So it's actually having the courage to push forward and do what's right.
Yeah, live by your values and
lead by example.
Yeah, absolutely. Do what's fair and just. Excellent. So going back to sort of your early days, what happens then? So you're growing up, young kid, coming out of school.
Yeah.
Where do we go? What happens?
All right, so a little bit more background about me. So one of those kids that found most things academically quite easy.
Yep.
So good at problem solving, good at numeracy. Found language a little bit more difficult.
Yep.
Could generally wing it is probably what it was like. So I got a test today. Okay, I'm just going to rock up and do that test.
As long as I get a pass mark, that's all that matters.
I did pretty well,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Until I got to about year 11 and it became more complex, and I still tried to do that. It's the same thing.
Old habits don't.
Yeah, so a little bit tricky, and probably got a little bit distracted with social life.
Yep.
You know, life was pretty good.
Chasing the boys.
Yeah, well, going out, having fun with my friends. Schoolwork, didn't really know how to study.
Yeah.
Didn't really know how to work really hard to get good outcomes.
Yeah.
Coasted through year 12, just passed, didn't get any uni offers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that was...
I reckon I had the exact same scenario play out.
Really interesting, but, you know, that's okay. What am I going to do now? So I applied to go to TAFE and I did a associate diploma in accountancy. Found numbers really easy. I thought, why not do something that you find really easy? So I went and did accountancy and then got my first job as a cost accountant at an organisation called National Pay-Per-View Pack.
Okay.
Made like bread bags and things like that.
So old debt mould.
Yeah, similar to that.
Yeah.
So got myself a job as an accountant and I was pretty happy with that. But at a point in time, probably when I was around 23, I decided to apply to go to university. And at that point, I went and did my Bachelor of Commerce at Flinders and was a mature student.
Okay. So what sparked that? Was there, were you wanting more in your career or
I think
hit a ceiling? Or?
You couldn't do your CA, couldn't do your CPA.
Yeah, okay.
So I wanted to get more of a better qualification. Missed out on the uni life.
Yeah.
You know, that was because when you're an adult going through uni, it's different. But having said that, it was so incredibly powerful going through as an adult when you're working in the field because you've got all of the real life examples that you can draw on. So I got a lot out of my degree and then went on to do my CPA, and I remember finishing off my CPA when my daughter was 1 year old. So working full time, studying, it was
juggling
just,
so many
it was
hats.
just a lot going on.
There's something in that. I did my MBA while I was working as well, and you're right. Like, you just bring examples of your business into it. I actually got sort of halfway through the MBA and then thought, actually, I'm learning more in just running this business alone than what I am. So I haven't finished it. I've just got halfway through. And because I just think the real life example. But I do remember at the time when I was doing the marketing stuff, doing this, the finance stuff, I was just bringing real life examples in. And it was so much easier to learn. It would be hard for an 18-year-old to learn something when they're just stepping into this world for the first time, because you don't get taught how to read a bank balance or a profit and loss statement when you're in school.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah. So what happens there? So you then land a job at Kimberly Clark after?
Yes.
It's a big multinational.
Yeah, so I worked there for a few years doing similar types roles. Really enjoyed that job because I was always the person that worked between the finance department and operations.
Yeah.
So I got to hang out with the field guys or the factory people a lot, and they're so insightful about what's going on. And my job was to work out how much material they were using and whether yield's appropriate or not.
Yeah, okay.
There were so many really great experiences I had, and I learned so much from the people that were running the machines and the likes. So it was a really wonderful experience.
What did you learn early on with the Kimberly Clarks? And I believe that you went then to Fordings Pharmaceuticals and then Balfour's thereafter. What did you learn through those early years of your career that you think held you in good stead?
I think that what it taught me was that everybody across the organisation has a role to play and have insights, and it's just wonderful to draw on those insights because it informs what you're doing. So working in isolation, you're not going to get the best outcomes that you're going to need. And the relationships and sitting there in the finance department going, well, I'm going to tell you what you can spend and what you can do. You've actually got to build relationships across the organisation to holistically get the best outcomes. So that taught me a lot, and I was very fortunate the positions I had allowed me to do that because I was embedded in the business. So I wasn't a traditional accountant as such that did your tax and stat accounts or anything like that. So
it's funny because we, SynergyIQ, the company which I run, part of our framework is perspectives, right? Which is seeking those perspectives and understanding those perspectives. What are people seeing? What are they hearing? What are they tasting? What are they smelling? Whatever it might be, because it's only then you can actually walk into change walk into actually executing on anything, because you're actually taken into those. If you're coming in at it cold with your one perspective, then the likelihood of this sticking is just not going to work, right?
Yeah, seek to understand from everybody's perspective and you're going to get a much better outcome.
100%. And those perspectives are quite difficult sometimes to understand. We have an analogy which we would call the street corner analogy, right? And if you're if you think about an intersection, a T-section, where there's a car accident in the middle of this T-section, Kerry, you're on one corner and I'm on the other corner looking at this car accident. We see the same car accident from two different perspectives, and you saw the little black cat that ran across the road, and I saw this guy on the mobile phone slamming on his brakes and hitting the back of the car. We saw it from two different perspectives. Both had different reasons to why the accident occurred, and none of us are wrong. And I think that's probably the most important thing, is you might sit there and go, no, this is the way I see it. And then they might come back at you and say, no, this is the way I see it. But no one's actually wrong in this scenario. And so understanding that's really critical.
And being open to the conversation, and sometimes perspectives, you can have really robust, respectful conversations.
Correct.
And that's what you need to do.
Yeah. Just be human and try to understand. Like you said, it's the old Stephen Covey, seek to understand.
Yeah, definitely.
So what happens through the career? So you're to get to Balfours, I understand you met someone who, can you tell me about that story?
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. So when I applied to work at Faulding Pharmaceutical, I went through the recruitment process and I had a little bit of self-doubt. I remember going through, and I was probably 24.
Yeah.
Had a little bit of self-doubt going through the recruitment process and didn't get the job. And I thought, okay, what can I learn out of that? Within a week, I got asked to come back in because the big boss couldn't understand why I didn't progress through, because my application was so strong. That gentleman's name is Peter Mendo, and he was one of the most supportive people through my career. So I went in to meet Peter, and I still remember the day. It was at Faulding's, Underdale, in this beautiful building, and I sat down. We had a short exchange where I spoke, and then he proceeded to speak about the organisation for the next 40 minutes. And I didn't say a word.
Yeah.
I've come out and I've gone, this is the best interview ever.
Yeah.
I got the job.
Yeah.
So that was actually quite an awkward situation, because when I started in the role, the people that I was working for didn't put me forward as the preferred candidate.
Yeah.
Their boss had.
Yeah.
And so that was quite difficult for a young person to go into that.
Because you sat and listened, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's also, they didn't want me.
Yeah.
But I'm in there. So it was quite an awkward situation. And within a few months, my boss came and said, I just want to let you know that I think you're amazing in this role. And I made the wrong decision right up front. And I'm so glad that Peter came in and did that.
Did you ever find out why they didn't put you?
No, I didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
I just thought, leave it. They're happy. But Peter, he gave me opportunities. So he must have seen something in me. And there were opportunities that I worked really, really hard to be successful in. And there were times when I remember walking into meetings just feeling like an absolute imposter. You know, I'm walking in, there's this group, and primarily men, really experienced in the sector. And I'm thinking, don't ask me a question. I needed the time to build my confidence. But I did, and I was really, really successful, and my career advanced through Fauldings. They got taken over, and I was finance manager by the time that happened. And I was in a position where they were happy for me to stay in Adelaide and do the role, but all of the operations would go to Melbourne. Okay. And I found it really difficult to not have people that I was working alongside. So Peter Mendo had left. He'd gone to Balfours, and he said, come work for me and be my finance manager. And I thought, well, what a great opportunity, because Fauldings was a very large organisation. I was a finance manager for one part of the business. Yep. I was going to be the finance manager for the whole business, and what an amazing experience that was. And so I was at Balfours was there for about 8 months, and then I went off and had my daughter and came back. And when I came back, it was a little bit different. So I made a decision at that point in time to look for something different and just put a call out to my network to say I'm looking for 3 days a week. This is what my skill set is, and got a few different leads to follow up on. But again, Peter Mendo said, I've now at SA Water and I've got so many things that I need to do. I'd really love for you to come and do that part-time. And so I went, that's how I ended up at SA Water before my 18 years of time spent there.
Very good. Now, I'm just going to just dart back to your first meeting with Peter. I think that, the Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, there is literally a whole chapter in that book where it's saying, and he uses this example. He goes, you can go to a party or an event or something like that and talk to someone for an hour, right? Where you then speak for 5 minutes and they speak for 55 minutes and they'll walk away thinking that's the best conversation that they've ever had. And it's it's funny because that actually works. So the art of listening and downloading people's information is actually a skill. I mean, I do it every time we get into this podcast. It is actually something that works and is of benefit. So you got 2 ears. What's the old saying? You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So you should
use it in that portion.
Use it to that proportion. You said then that, and I don't know how much you want to dive into this, so feel free to jump over it if you have to. But you said that Balfour's had changed. What was it? What was it that just said, no, I can't work here anymore?
There were a couple of things. So probably one of the things that they were really struggling with was financial cash flow.
Okay.
And soon after I left, they got bought out. So being the finance manager, I found a little bit uncomfortable in terms of trying to manage that really tight cash flow. Yeah,
because it's such an iconic brand, right? And it's still, I reckon I got a couple of their products in my freezer at home.
Well, it's a pretty dangerous place to work because you go into the lunchroom and there's a pie warmer full of pies and there's a cake display full of cakes.
I can imagine.
So I tried to steer clear of this.
Not good for the waistline. So Peter has an attempt to bring you over to SA Water and is successful again. And you start in that role in what capacity?
So I worked as a manager of commercial projects.
Okay.
So that would be from a level position, probably a level 4. So a manager level position in a large organisation.
Frontline manager, And you work up your way to be, where am I here? I've got some statistics around the role in which you were working. You work up to be the General Manager of Customer and Community Relations, which is a huge role, 24/7 customer care, 30,000 calls per month, 400,000 bills per month. SA Water is such a critical place for business for South Australia. And as a result, you became known as a champion in customer-centered design. So
how do you get from here to here?
Yeah, I'm keen to explore how you've gone through that process.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and sometimes I reflect on it and think, how did that happen?
Yeah, where did that all happen?
So let me try and run through that as succinct as I can. So there are a few things. I spoke about Peter Mendo being really pivotal in my career. There was also a gentleman by the name of Neil White, who was one of the general managers. Neil. Yeah. He was a fantastic mentor to me. So when I was doing one of my commercial projects for part of the business, it was part of the business that he ran, and he came and said to me, can you come and be my commercial manager? Yeah. And I said, well, I can, but I'm trying to get pregnant at the moment, so I might need to take some time off. And we agreed that would wait until I had my second child. Yep. And when I came back from maternity leave after having Jack, Neil and I had another conversation. He said, I'd love for you to come and be my commercial manager. 3 days a week's fine, because I was really clear that that's all I can offer at the moment, because that was a balance that I needed from a personal and professional perspective. And I started working as a commercial manager in the business. Fast forward a few years, took a strong interest in business development. So I was doing all of the business cases that supported all the proposals for business development. And the gentleman that was going to be leaving and retiring, Neil asked if I would be interested in shadowing him to be in a position to be successful in winning that role, which I was. And so I stepped into doing business development, which was great. So I took my skills that I had learned through my career of being the finance person in the business, doing all of the stakeholder, to doing that externally. And so again, I just spent my time seeking to understand what the customers wanted out of the arrangement, and then I'd layer that with what we needed out of the arrangement. I'd see where there was agreement, and where there wasn't, I'd work to come to resolution. It's pretty basic sort of formula. So I went into the business development. I do also remember that when I was in the commercial manager role, I remember having a conversation with Neil saying, at some point, do you think that you'd give me an opportunity to act as the general manager? And he kind of looked at me a bit taken back, and he said, oh, maybe, we'll see. And probably needed to get a few more runs under the board, probably the language that he would have used with me.
But you asked the question.
But I asked the question, and he took it seriously. And there were a few things that I needed to develop in. But at a point in time, he said, can you act for me while I go away? And notorious at SA Water, bad things always happen when people go on leave.
Yeah.
On a Friday afternoon at 4. It always happens. So
Murphy's Law.
Oh, it's just so annoying. So I went into business development and started doing lots of the acting for Neil when he wasn't around. And then in 2013, there was a big shake-up at SA Water, and there was some general managers that left the business. And John Ringham, the then chief executive, after that announcement had been made, came and saw me and asked me to step into the role in an acting capacity while they went through a recruitment process, which was an absolute privilege to have that responsibility, be asked to do that. But it was really bittersweet. I found it incredibly difficult to step into a role that Neil was in that he was no longer in.
Yeah.
And I remember ringing him that night and, saying, I'm sorry that this is how this has gone. This is what's happened. I've been asked to step into this role. And he said, well, I couldn't think of a better person to do it. And you need to do everything that you can to win that role ongoing. And I'll do everything that I can to support you in doing that, which was just so incredibly generous of him. And so I went through the recruitment process. I did have a really interesting conversation with my husband, because I was still, even though I was doing the business development, I think I was 0.9, I was still doing some of the pickups of the kids. And I said, this is an opportunity that's coming my way. It's got to be right for our family. What do you think? And he said, you've worked so hard for it. Now's the time for you to step forward, and I'll lean in more with the kids. And so we had this slight shift in roles within our home, and it enabled me to step in and do the general management role, which was leading the customer and community relations division. And that was the start of my general manager. But it's a really weird position to be in, to progress through an organisation the size of SA Water, from a manager to a senior manager to a general manager. It's really, really tricky. And I'll share one insight that I had was, before I was a general manager, I wasn't always right. People would challenge me. I took on a general manager role, and all of a sudden, everything I said was right, and everybody agreed with it. And I had to call my team in and said, last week I wasn't right all the time. How come I'm right all the time now? You need to not change the way that you interact. You need to call it when it needs to be called. Yeah. You've got permission to do that. I kind of felt like I had to give them permission, which seemed really, really weird, but there's this kind of this hierarchy that comes into play.
Yeah, we don't want a conforming culture, right?
No, that's not me at all. No. So that's how I ended up leading a customer division.
I think there's such an important insight what you've just said then, though, in regards to leadership, and that belief that leaders are always right. It comes back to perspectives. Well, this is my perspective, and this is how I see it should be done, and I'm in the leadership role, therefore do as I say. And I like that style of leadership just gets you nowhere. And so I think, it is amazing that you can call it out, and the vulnerability that it takes to say, hey, I'm not always right. Please, can you challenge this? Like, I want, and that's kind of what I ask to the team here as well. It's like, I actually want you to challenge me on this one, because I'm just thinking that this might be the scenario, but I don't actually know. So that vulnerability is important. I want to just cast back to Neil bringing you on in that management role at 3 days a week. I think there is, I'm struggling. As I was doing sort of research for this, because I knew this beforehand, right? So I've been thinking about how to ask this question without belittling anyone or anything like that. But I do think it's important that we talk a little bit. There are people in this world, and we mentioned earlier, there's still people in this world who have this gender and role diversity viewpoint on the world. And these people might argue that, you saying, no, I want to work 3 days a week because I want to raise a family, could impact your ability to professional advancement. They could argue that there's lack of career commitment. My question, like I said, I'm struggling to figure out how to ask this, but I think you know where I'm going with it. How do you respond to the critics who hold that view, right? What would you say to those who believe that these choices actually perpetuate stereotypes in the workplace? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask here?
So let me share with you a comment that one person made to me that was in a very senior position. So I went into their office, they were a general manager level position, to talk to them. This is when I was in the commercial manager position 3 days a week. And he said to me, "Kerry, do you have children?" And I said, "Yes, I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Well, what are you doing with them while you're here? Why aren't you at home with your children?" And I said, "I don't understand. What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, my wife, she was home with our children when they needed her." And I just went, "Oh, my children are very well rounded. I have amazing support through the childcare centre," and just completely discounted what his view was. Because
As if you weren't a good mother because
Yeah, and so I actually don't let people's views, and I didn't let people's views affect me at all. I actually just discounted them because I thought that they were very narrow, and I thought I don't have I don't have capacity and time to waste on that view.
Great attitude. And maybe that's the best answer. Just disregard. But in a world where we want to see change and we want to see these viewpoints tarnished,
So I've spent a lot of time helping women through their career in terms of that work-life balance. And what I always say to them is the first thing that you need to do is work out what is right for you and your family. And it's different for everybody. For us, it worked out 3 days a week was perfect. But I had a girlfriend that when her child was 2, she wanted to go back to work full-time. And the amount of criticism that she got was huge. And I said, well, you just got to actually dismiss that, because that's not about you, that's about them. So what suits your family, your work, and you just need to be really clear about that. This is what I'm willing to do and this is what I'm not willing to do and this is why. And I'm a big believer, work out what's right for you, but be really transparent about it.
Yes. Agreed. And we've had on a previous podcast, she's the CEO of the Civil Contractors Federation South Australia, Rebecca Pickering, who went back to work 7 days, I believe. It was 7 days after her. And because she and her husband made that choice, the husband at the time, they are separated, but the husband at the time made that choice that was what was best for their family. And the amount of criticism that she got, as you can imagine. But unless you know context, this comes back to any situation. Unless you know context or someone's perspective, it's really difficult to make a decision. You need to put yourself in others' shoes. So thank you for sharing that. How did you at the time? Because I really love that. I'm a family first. Like my family means everything, and I always struggle with the balancing act of what would be, being a great father and being there for my wife and my children. How did you create harmony between these two worlds? And I mean, even today, have you figured that out? I know your kids are a bit older now, but where did you land with that?
So there were a few things that I did. So right up front, I worked out what I could do. It was 3 days. And then I also spoke to my manager and spoke about school holidays are a bit of a nightmare. All right.
We're in them right now, yeah.
And so when you got little kids, I didn't want my kids to go to OSH for the whole of school holidays. So what I negotiated with my manager was that I would purchase leave.
Yep.
And so I had 1 week off every school holidays. This was planned a year in advance. 1 week off every school holidays, and I'd take 4 weeks at Christmas. We would work together and work out how we'd cover that off. So really planned, no surprises. And I got to have the balance with the kids, but also have that professional stimulation, which is what I needed. We also made a decision that we travel a lot with the kids, and we do that from going away camping, as in bush camping, no range, bikes on, caravan, go and...
No showers.
With solar power.
Oh, yeah, okay. So really out there.
Pretty back to basics, through to going overseas for 4 weeks or 5 weeks with them. We just alternate between different holidays, go over to Asia for 2 weeks. So that was what was really important to us. We worked full time, but we would have really high quality holidays. We would teach the kids that you don't have to spend a lot of money to have great time, but there are things that we want to experience around the world. So we'd do them all differently every time. And it meant that when we were on those holidays, we had the dedicated time. And I would also make sure from a work perspective that I handed over everything. And one other thing that I'll share with you, particularly as I became more senior and the demands became a lot greater, and one of the portfolios that I had at SA Water, I had all of the field operations from across the state. And so any major incident around water main breaks and the likes, if it was major, I was pretty much on call. So there were times when I did have to lean in, but I had a really strong work ethic, and that was that during the week I'll do whatever needs to happen. Friday at 5 o'clock through to Monday at 8 o'clock. Unless there was an emergency, I wouldn't be working. So that weekend time was 100% dedicated to my family.
Yep.
As you know, when you become more senior in organisations, you can work 24/7.
Yeah.
The work never runs out.
Yeah.
So you've got to give yourself those really clear boundaries about how do you make sure that you've got that your personal life is given priority.
What about at nighttime, family dinners? Did you set because so many of us logging back on, and you can work from home these days, and it's just so more connected now than it ever has been. How do you switch off at nighttime?
Yeah. So ever since they were able to eat normal food, the same food,
solids,
we have had dinner together every night.
Yeah, great.
So no telly on. We sit around the dining room table. We all eat dinner together. We all eat the same thing. So my poor kids. And I remember my daughter, when she was even in her high chair, she was having chicken curry and she's saying, "Hot, Daddy, hot. And just blow on it, on it." And then he's had a mouthful and he's like, "Wow, that is spicy."
Chili hot, yeah.
But
that's hot or just hot? Yeah.
But even now, both my kids still live at home.
Yeah.
When they're not working because they've got part-time jobs, and we still have dinner together.
That's fabulous.
Most nights, and sit around, and one of the things I would quite often say, I remember when they were little, we'd sit around the table and I'd say, "What was the best thing that happened to you today?" And so you could get out of this drama of, this happened, and it made them think about, well, this happened, so let's have a positive spin on.
It's the gratitude.
Yeah. So we've always, and we still do it today, and I really cherish that time still.
Yeah, I ask a similar question, which is, what's one thing you learnt today?
Yeah.
So during the day, they're actually trying to think about, what am I going to learn today? Yeah, which is great. I think, it's all about getting one step better every day. I want to talk to you about I mentioned it earlier, how you've been described as this customer-centered design champion. And this is something that sounds so obvious. And when we spoke last, you said to me that, again, same thing. You seek to understand the perspectives of those out in the community or your customer or whatever it might be, and then bring it back and then design the work, design the work in which you do for them. How come, like I said, this seems so obvious to me. How come businesses fail so badly at it? They stick to what they know, they do things the way it's always been done, and not seek to understand those which they're trying to serve.
As a very general response to that, people think that they're the expert and they know better. And what happens is, time and time again, people are surprised with what the customer wants, how different it is to what the person that's got so much more knowledge thinks the customer wants.
Yeah, this is the logical option versus,
Yeah, so it's my experience of being at SA Water and being tasked with changing the culture from engineering focus to customer focus. That was kind of my remit from taking on the job. You've got to have leadership from the top with that belief for a couple of reasons. Otherwise you end up just talking the talk, which we spoke about, not walking the walk. But there's funding associated with doing consumer engagement. So if you're doing a capital project and you need to go and talk to consumers, you got to allocate money to go and talk to people.
Costs a lot.
Yeah. And people want to use that for infrastructure or other things, but it actually ends up costing you a lot more in the long run because you have to go and change things. I mean, we were designing the new bill at SA Water, and so we got people to come in and do a focus group, and we said to them, bring your favourite bill, show us what it is. Okay, now here's a pair of scissors and some sticky tape. You cut them all out and make up a bill that's got the stuff that you want to see on it. I can tell you it was completely different to what the team had come up with.
That's amazing. Who was holding on to their bills? that's the first thing they went through.
It was a few years ago now when paper bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's not the only thing I got out of that. Well, what was some? I mean, that's a great story. What was there any other experiences? I know you've got probably thousands of them, but what was something that sticks in your mind where you thought to yourself, actually, that's what good customer service looks like?
So there's probably a couple of examples. I'll talk quite holistically and then I'll go to a specific example. We, within the water industry, we're really changing that mindset. And so SA Water, for their regulatory determination, decided to be consumer informed for the first time. And so I was tasked with leading the consumer engagement. It was a massive piece of work. It was really interesting because we went out to our broad consumers, and when you've got a population of 1.7 million people that you're servicing, there's lots of different perspectives.
Yep.
So you go out and you theme up what's important to your consumers, you bring that back, you do some work on it, and then you take it back out to a consumer group, so it might be through focus groups, and you ask specific questions. How long do you think it's reasonable to take for a crew to get out to repair a leaking meter? How long do you think it's reasonable for a crew to come out to have something that's causing property damage? All of those things. And you ask lots of questions. Well, how much are you willing to pay for that? So you get into this is what I want, but there's a cost associated with it. So you do this willingness to pay analysis as well. You take that back into your organisation, you develop business cases, and then you go back out to the consumers again and say, this is what you've told me, I've put it all together, this is what it looks like, do you agree with it or not? So that was the first time in the water industry in Australia that had been done.
Amazing.
And it was so incredibly powerful. So what it meant was our submission, so in effect our 4-year budget that we put through to the regulator, it meant that the projects were in there, we had the broad community's support to do.
Yep.
If I think about it in the context of running a call centre and a billing system and all of those sorts of things, again at SA Water when we put in our customer relationship management system, didn't have one previously, we co-designed that with frontline staff. So frontline staff would come and say, what we would say to them, what do you think of this screen? What do you want to see on this screen? How do you want this to work? And so you had these agents that are on the phone all day designing with the project team what the screens are going to be looking like. So what that means is when you actually go to implement it, they're across it, they're accepting it, but they're also advocating, they're that change champion within their business group that means that the transition to go live is so much easier.
Much easier.
So, I mean, there are just a couple of examples.
Yeah, seeking to understand. One thing I am interested in more from, a big part of our listener base is entrepreneurs, small business owners as well, who, thinking about customer-centered design and building a product or a service around that, when there's lack of cash and availability, right? Like at SA Water, you could argue you could just go ask for the money to do it and you can build a business case. Whereas with small business entrepreneurship, cash availability is not there. Therefore, it becomes, I need to be more niche. I need to be more specific, and I'm not worried about those who sit outside the mainstream of what I'm trying to deliver. So do you have any advice for those people in this?
I don't think it needs to cost a lot of money. I think it's just about engaging people and bringing them on the journey. So, as you know, I work for not-for-profit and we're doing a survey at the moment, which we're looking at the unmet needs of people that are going through a cancer journey or a carer of somebody going through a cancer journey. that's not costing us much money. We're just sending a survey out and asking our contacts to send it out to their databases as well so that we can get enough information to then go and use it. So what I would say is do fit for purpose for your organisation.
Yeah.
And you can also reach in and tap into your resources that you have, your networks, see what other people are doing, see what information already exists that you can build on. But what I would strongly advocate against is not doing it at all. Like you have to do something. You can't not do it. I think for me it just shows a bit of arrogance if you don't go and talk to your consumers about what they want.
Yeah, correct. It is the startup mindset where it's very much around trial, implement, get feedback, come back fix, get feedback, come back fix, which is to your point, which is great. So you and I, we've talked a little bit about change in what you said there, and I'm interested to sort of dive into that topic a little bit further. But you and I got to know each other a little bit more over what was a very, very big change program for SA Water called the Ripple Effect, which we helped deliver in 2017. It was a huge program. It had such amazing buy-in from the senior leadership team cohort like yourself, and the CEO was at, I think we had 37 two-day workshops across the whole of it. I think it was 2,000 plus people across the whole of SA Water, and the CEO was at every one of those sessions bar two because he had to fly back to France, I think, for a family funeral. There was a senior leadership representative, one or two of you, at every single session. I mean, the commitment to leading through this was fabulous. I'm really interested in your thoughts around it because engagement levels went up by 10% at the end of this. It was like a 12-month program. The place was alight with optimism in, challenging the status quo and challenging the way there was new vision, there was new values. Like it was a fantastic program. What makes you think, when you look back at that, I think they still talk about the ripple effect today. What did you learn from that program in its own right?
Oh, look, on the onset, I'm incredibly proud of that program, and I'll ask you a question if I may.
Yeah.
How did you feel during that time, being an employee of SA Water?
Well, I was one up delivering it, right? And so I was there in front of everyone delivering it, and the buzz was just because it was the feeling of empowerment. We're actually allowed to have a voice here. And I'm sitting next to Kerry Rowland, the general manager, who's like 6 up from me or 5 up from me, and she's here in her jeans and a t-shirt, like a normal human.
She's a real person.
She's a real person, right? And not to mention, the environment we were in, which was at Adelaide Oval, and it was an amazing program. But yeah, as an employee at the time when I was delivering that program, I remember this guy came up to me, blue collar, out in the middle of the sticks, welding pipes, above ground pipes all day long. And he said to me, he goes, "I've never felt like my voice was heard here at this company until this program." Yeah. And I think that feedback is what we were getting every time.
That's exactly what I experienced as well. So I just felt this uplift of the workforce, empowerment, but you hit the nail on the head. You actually care about me and you want to hear what I have to say. And there were people that came and spoke to me that they've never spoken to a GM before in their life, and they were quite, is it okay? I'm like, of course it's okay.
Yeah.
What's up? And they were sharing things that, there was some things that got shared with me consistently, and I always look for themes when I'm talking to people, that they had a voice, and I was able to follow up on some things that weren't making their way up. The more you get, more senior you get in an organisation, the more filtered information is.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of my career going out and talking to frontline staff because I needed to build trust with them. I needed to show them that I care, and if there's something that they want to talk to me about, there's a platform for them to be able to talk to me about. And I'm not looking for individual grievances or anything like that.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for is patterns so that I can do my job better, but I can also take that voice into the executive table. Because I think it's so incredibly powerful. And that was a platform. Look, it re-baselined behavioural expectations, values. It gave people tools on how to work, ways of working. So the program itself was fabulous in terms of what it gave people. But the connectivity that we got out of it, and it was not only with our direct employees, but it was with all our contractors. And I loved it. And you're right, I used to go to a lot of them. I used to walk down and just sit in the back. A lot of them I just sit in the back and listen, because I was just so fascinated to hear what people's perspectives were from across the organisation.
Yeah. I reckon you were one of the most. I mean, Simon he was pretty much at every single
he
one
was at all of them.
as head of people and culture, but you were I think you were second,
I was at a lot of them.
second in line to that. And to be honest, like I said, I just remember the feeling within the business, even after it was on the up. It was actually, we're getting listened to here. It was so important. It went that well that actually Michelle and I went out and started our business off the back of it. And I spoke to Rock and said, "Are you happy?" And he's like, "No conflict. It's all good." Yeah. So it was a really amazing thing. So with so much change in the world, I mean, taking that as an example of what was a great change program. There's so much change in the world at the moment. Businesses need to constantly adapt. What emphasis do you place now in your role as CEO on taking and leading your organisation through change?
I think that any CE at this point in time has to be on a transformation journey all the time.
It's constantly evolving now.
Yeah. I don't think any of us are sitting still and just saying, let's just do business as usual, let's just do the status quo, because there's competitive challenges for us in the not-for-profit world. There's financial sustainability, there's challenges around retaining employees, and consumer expectations. They're changing. So I think that we always need to evolve our businesses. The one thing that I do, and I did this at SA Water, and I certainly did this when I came into the Cancer Council, was to really define what's our future state, what's our baseline, where are we right now. I need to understand exactly where we are right now, and I need to work with the board to develop a desired future state. I needed in the first period of time to get all the foundations right within Cancer Council, because I'm a big believer if you don't have the foundations right, you can go and do things, but it's going to come crashing down.
Yep.
So you might need to spend a short period of time, and you might think, oh, this isn't going fast enough, but spend the time, get the foundations right. And then you need to work out how you can move with pace to take you to your future state. So constantly transitioning.
Yep.
So that's my big belief. That's
I
what
agree.
we're employed for.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there was a study done recently. It was a small study, but nonetheless powerful, where it was 1,087, to be precise, board members were interviewed after they had fired a CEO. All right, so it was a very specific point in time when they asked the question, why did you fire that CEO? And 31%, like the number one answer that came back, was the inability to manage through change. Yeah. Was the number one answer. And so I think you're spot on in the saying that if CEOs and leaders are not thinking about how do we change and transform and evolve and bring our people along for the ride and seek to understand their perspectives in this and understand what they're needing and what the community's needing, then they're going to get left behind.
Look, I think that COVID taught us a lot. And I remember specifically when that happened, and I remember the SA Water was quite fast in sending people to work from home. Mm-hmm. And we were very fortunate that we had the technology and infrastructure to be able to do that. I was leading a large digital transformation program of work. And in April, we were meant to go live with a new bill, just 700,000 bills that were going to be sent out. And the team are like, what do we do? I said, okay, take a step back, and I want you to do a risk assessment around what is potentially going to happen because we're working remotely versus not. So what are the risks, the new risks that are posed because of this? And then once you've done that, I want you to look at how you can mitigate those risks. And then come back and have a conversation with me. Once we've got that information, we can make a decision if we're going to go live or not. So they went and did that piece of work. And they came back and they said, this is what it is. we feel that we can mitigate all the risks, we want to go live. And I said, absolutely, let's go live.
Perfect.
So you've got to, in those sorts of situations, you can't retract and do nothing. That's when the courage needs to come forward and you work out, well, how can I make it work? What are the risks? I can't just be, rogue and just go and do things that are going to be detrimental.
Correct.
But how can I make it work and be really considered, but keep pivoting, working, leaning forward? That's our role.
Beautiful. To your point, COVID's taught us a lot about change, and we've put a lot of research into this space within SynergyIQ, I should say, whereby COVID taught us, and to your point in sending everyone home from Microsoft Teams, before that working from home was, only a few people could do it or certain scenarios, and then all of a sudden the world's working from home. And it worked because we were able to make sense of it, right? And I think that's the critical piece, and this is where a lot of our research has gone into the art of sense making when going through change. In COVID, when you send people home to work, there is Microsoft Teams, there is technology to enable you. People take it on because they're able to make sense of it because it's keeping me safe and other people safe and we're not getting sick. What happened, though, was that organisations went, oh, great, we can just push change out onto an organisation and they can accept it and it can move forward. But that only happened with Microsoft Teams. Everything else they pushed there and after was like, oh, hang on, this changes the way that I work, this changes this, and they couldn't make sense of it. Therefore, it fell and products would sit on the shelf and not get used and people would be unhappy and change fatigue would kick in. All these sort of things followed because we learnt some bad habits in the middle of COVID as well. So it's about what we're trying to do is sort of reframe that right now and go, hang on, let's go back. It's never stopped being about our people, right? It's always about our people and how can we help change the way they see this and how can we help them move forward as opposed to let's just push what we think is best for business onto the organisation. So anyway, I've had my 2 cents worth about that. Now, let's jump into the world of the Cancer Council. In 2021, you got the opportunity to join as their CEO, which is your first ever full-time CEO gig. So kudos. How's it been jumping into the fire pit? It's a tough world being a CEO.
Yes and no. Actually, I love it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, you've got to be made for it, right?
Well, Cancer Council is an amazing organisation. What we stand for and what we do every day is an absolute privilege to lead. When I was looking at leaving SA Water, I wanted to go somewhere that I could continue making a big difference for the community of South Australia.
Yeah, both purposeful businesses, aren't they?
Yeah, really. I had never worked in not-for-profit, been on not-for-profit boards, so seen it from a different perspective. It's a tough gig in terms of financial sustainability. So Cancer Council doesn't receive any government funding to run our operations. The beautiful community of South Australia to enable us to do the work that we do. There were a couple of things that... the other thing that I was really looking for and when I went into the organisation was the governance structure that sits over the top, because you're only as good as what you're empowered to do. And so that was really, really important to me. I saw that the chair's the Honourable Carleen Maywald, who used to be the Water Minister, so I'd had a level of involvement with her previously and I'd always held her in really high regard from a cultural perspective and the way that she interacts and engages with people. Yep. So I was like, tick. And then I had a look at the rest of the board, and it's a volunteer board and just outstanding in terms of the capabilities. So
there's people wanting to give back to.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. We're all touched by cancer.
Yeah, correct.
Each of us have our 100%. Own unique experiences. Yep. But you go into from an organisation like SA Water that has a lot of structure and management systems, for want of a better phrase.
Red tape, is it?
Yeah, to an organisation that didn't. And so I had to spend probably the first 6 months of my time there really establishing the baselines. What's the governance structure? How do I make sure that the board are, just refreshing everything, making sure that I had the right capabilities in the organisation. So we had some change happen at the most senior levels. And I looked at it like a bit of a bell curve. When I came in and put some more structure around things, a whole heap of people went, yay, that's great. And a few people went, I'm out. I don't want to be part of this. And that's okay.
Which is good.
Yeah, so...
Because they are an adult and they're allowed to make a choice whether they want to be there or not.
This is the way that it's going to be now.
Correct.
And this is what we're going to do. And the other thing that's quite difficult within a not-for-profit, people will say to me, I want 100% of my donation to go to a mission. And I say, okay, well, let's look at it as a different perspective. I will leverage your dollar to get $4.
Yeah.
So I can't run a business without structure that sits underneath it.
Correct.
So people need to understand that. So the way that I look at it is we're a for-purpose organisation.
Yeah.
We're here to deliver against our strategic objectives. This is what we're going to deliver.
Yeah.
So it's been very different. It's also part of a federation. So I don't know if you've ever worked across a federation before. That is really interesting because you have 8 chief executives all running organisations that are branded the same. And you have some rules of engagement, in effect, that sit over the top. So that's complex.
Yeah.
So that has been really interesting.
At each individual board, or is there one? Yeah.
Yeah, individual boards. And then you have a chief executive forum and you have a chairs forum.
Okay.
So that's where the influencing and the stakeholder management comes into play. So it's so important to be able to work and influence at that level. So that gives me the challenge as well. But I'm enjoying that.
It sounds like you're. I mean, what have you learned about yourself since?
It's interesting because when I left SA Water, I was probably a bit tired. Like I was getting a lot of the really complex projects to run, and I was just like, I just need a little bit of space. And so what I've learned about myself, I was probably carrying a lot. I'm a bit lighter in this organisation, and I've also learned that I've had to, and I did this very quickly, adapt my leadership style to the environment that I am in.
Yep.
So people might say, you're a bit softer in this environment than what you were when you were in SA Water. And I say, well, my expectations and what I'm asking for are the same. I'm just doing it, my style's just a little bit different because it needs to be a little bit different in this environment. And so I've just learned to adapt to the environment that I'm in.
And is that because it is in a non-for-profit space and people are there more out of wanting to help community more? I mean, SA Water it's hard not to understand that you're helping the community and keeping the community safe, and by providing clean and safe drinking water. Not only that, but removing disease from their house with the wastewater. But in regards to, cancer, like you said, it touches everyone and is much more personable. Yeah.
So I think that your composition of your workforce is different. So within SA Water, lots of engineers, lots of more
capital delivery.
So it's more how do I say this? It's more logic thinking.
Yep.
Whereas within Cancer Council, you've got a lot of public health experts, a lot of people that really understand what you do over here increases your risk of cancer or reduces your risk of
more
cancer.
More humanistic thinking, isn't it?
Yeah. So and it's just a different style of thinking that happens within the organisation that means that I've just got to adjust my style a little bit. So I'm still not certainly moving away from the core of who I am and around my expectation. It's just a slight pivot. And I think you've got to be adaptable to the environment that you're in.
Yeah. How much time, I think I speak to a lot of CEOs here on this podcast and through work, and how much time do you spend reflecting? And, you said something earlier which stuck in my mind, which is you never run out of work. And when you were talking in context into your family and setting some boundaries there, but it got me thinking in regards to, do you reflect? Do you spend time sitting, thinking, reflecting on how to be a better leader, on how to lead through change, on how to execute on the strategy, whatever it might be?
I try to. So I'm a big believer of creating space to innovate. So how do you create thinking time for myself, for my leaders? So one way that I do that is that I alternate my executive meetings, the agenda, from fortnight to fortnight. So one fortnight we talk about operational issues. So all the stuff that's going on that we need to address. And then the other fortnight we only have strategic topics that come on to the agenda, and they might be 45 minutes that we've allocated to talk about something. And my expectation is that everybody around the table has a view and an opinion. They may not be the specialist in that space, but they can contribute. And quite often when I have my strategy sessions with my execs, I ask them to lead and facilitate for an area that's not their discipline or portfolio, so that they're forced to think about it, and it doesn't leave it all to the person that has it, because yes, they're the expert, but they could be missing something.
Yeah.
So I would love to find more time. Generally, it's probably 3:00 in the morning that I wake
know.
up and I go, that would work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we probably all need a little bit more time to do that.
Yeah.
Reflection's so important.
Without doubt. So what does success, I mean, a couple of years in the role now, what does success look like for you in this role? I mean, and you know, my next question on there, and what is some of the great work that you are looking to do within Cancer Council in the next couple of years?
So where we're at the moment, we've got all of our baseline, right? We've just 18 months ago moved into our new building on Green Hill Road.
It's a beautiful building.
It's amazing. So we support anybody that's going through cancer, but particularly in that space, we have 120 rooms of accommodation.
Yeah. I actually, just on that, I walked in, and I remember I said this to you when I walked in. It was quite confronting in the sense of how many sick people there were, people going through there. I remember one chap walking around with the drip, I think, and had like half of his face missing, almost, or his cheek missing, which... So on that alone, there's quite traumatic for some of your staff as well to be seeing this, or I don't know, it's a mental health thing, or...
So just on that, so previously we had 2 sites that had accommodation, and then we had a corporate head office that was in a separate location. We're all in the same
building
location
now.
So
which is great because you're closer to it,
The good and bad is that the good, every day we walk into work, we know why we're here.
Yeah, 100%.
We talk about change. We've spoken about change a lot today. In the lead up to us moving into that one site, we had a change management program in place. Part of that was around talking to our staff about what they may see, feel, experience when they're going into the new building, what they should do about it. So we're very considered about that, and we have avenues for people. Unfortunately, we have people pass away in our building, and our staff might be the people that find them and the like. So we have a very good support process around. So the building, it keeps us really true to what we're there for.
Absolutely.
Which we're so incredibly
You
fortunate.
can get that sense when you walk in.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I cut you off. So
no, but I forgot the question now.
So what will success look like for you, and what is the Cancer Council doing? Like, what are you looking to do in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we've had a building, beautiful building. We've had a lot of success around advocating for removing single-use vapes.
Oh, yes.
So one of my...
it's a big bugbear of yours.
Yes, a big bugbear of mine, and in particular, my predecessors and people over the last 30 years have done amazing work in getting traditional smoking down to the lowest levels they've ever been here in Australia. And then vaping comes, and big tobacco targeting children. And I find that
disgusting.
Really,
I actually read, I knew you were going to talk about this today, and in a recent report, the Cancer Council found that more than 8% of Australian secondary school students surveyed had smoked cigarettes in the previous year. I mean, more than 15% of them had vaped, right, which is scary.
Huge. So we know that it's a really big issue for younger teens in particular. They're targeting with the flavours. They say that they're not containing nicotine, but the majority of them are. The nicotine concentrations are about 5 times that of a traditional cigarette. And we know that 1 in 3 people that vape will transition over to traditional cigarettes. So we've done all this amazing work over 30 years. The smoking rate has gone from 2% to 8% for 15 to 20-year-olds, I think it is, in the last year. So it's happening. We've got kids being presented at ED with poison in their lungs and stuff. So it's terrible. So we've been doing a lot of work at a state and federal level to advocate for change in legislation and regulation.
So how are they getting their hands on this?
Well, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere, through their friends and the likes.
And you can just buy it online and...
Yeah. You just get them from your
There
mate.
was no
Someone
regulation?
Going to convenience previously, there's regulation, but enforcement wasn't being done.
Okay.
So how do you tell if a vape's got nicotine in it or not, if it's just sitting there? And it's used to be legal to sell them in a convenience, not to under 18. It's it just happened. It's so incredibly frustrating. So, and the schools, like you imagine dealing with that at schools. And
I have friends that are school teachers, and they say you walk past the bathrooms and you can smell the vape.
And then the kids are going to have nicotine withdrawal. So how are we going to support these kids once they can't use them? So that's a big, and we've made so much progress and really, really proud of the work that we've done in that space. In terms of going forward, there's a couple of things. At the federation level, we've got a significant investment from the federal government across the 8 entities to enhance our cancer navigation. So that's where we've got oncology nurses on the end of the phone. So I'm leading that piece of work on behalf of the Federation, which is just a fabulous opportunity. So I'm really looking forward to getting our utilisation rates up and getting more consistent. And then we're looking at how do we make sure that all of the needs across the state are being met. So we've just done a survey around unmet needs, and it's showing us that out north is where the greatest need is, a little bit out south, but out north. So we're just undertaking some feasibility studies around what is it that we can do to lean into that space and help more people. That's what we're all about.
Helping people, which is great. And I mean, the world's a pretty crazy place at the moment. Cost of living has gone up. I would dare say that has impacted the Cancer Council in the way of donations from the public.
Yeah.
So is there a way in which we can engage? I mean, is there a way in which we can use this platform to engage leaders, corporate leaders?
Yeah.
How can they be more socially responsible? I mean, I understand the world is in this space, but corporate world might be able to lean in a little bit more.
Yeah, so I agree. So we have seen across the board around a 10% reduction in donations. That's across the sector from about June, July last year, and particularly around regular giving. So people just can't afford to pay their mortgage, feed their families. So charities have suffered as a consequence of that as well. So we spoke about this before around our role of pivoting and leaning in. So one of the things that we're really doing at Cancer Council is really trying to knock on the doors of corporates, getting people to lean in and what's their social responsibility. And if you think about it from an employer's perspective, their employee value proposition, they want to work for an organisation that looks after the environment, that does their social good. And now's the time. We need it now more than ever for the corporates to lean in and see where they can make a difference, because everybody needs a hand. The not-for-profit sector is going to need a hand over the next period of time until this cost of living really sorts itself out. But if there's certainly people listening to the podcast that think that they've got an opportunity to lean in a bit further, certainly reach out to us.
Yeah, I'm going to call it out. Please do. I think because what happens if they don't? What happens if
the worst of it would be that we need to cut back services, and I don't think that anybody wants to be in a situation where we're pulling back on what we're doing. What we want to be doing is doing more, working out where the gaps are and where we can lean in more.
Yeah, and you said it earlier. I mean, everyone's touched by cancer at some point, and you don't know that you need these services until you need these services, right? So it's like, how do you almost pay it forward in a sense? Yeah, I don't know. It's a silly way. I'm not saying that everyone's going to get cancer, but whether it might be for your friends or your family, or someone is going to need this help at some point.
So what we're really focusing on is across 3 areas, and if you don't mind, I'll just share.
Go for it.
So prevention, we want to empower people to make good choices. We want to advocate for change.
Yep.
So tobacco and vaping and the likes, but we want people to go and have their screenings done. So there's bowel, breast, cervical screenings. Go and have them done. But equally as important, know yourself. Do your self-checks. And if something changes or you're not feeling right, go and get it checked out. So there's a really strong prevention. 1 in 3 cancers are preventable. And that might be through your screenings, but it's also lifestyle choices. Exercise, stay fit, watch what you're eating. You know, obesity causes lots of different cancers. So prevention's great. You need to do that, and people need to focus on that. Research. The advances that have happened in research over the last however many years, let's say 30 years, have been incredible. The advances in the last 3 years have been incredible. But if I pull out a statistic, the chance of surviving cancer today is around 70%. 30 years ago, it was 50%.
Yeah, wow.
And that's due to the advancements in research But the other thing that we're really focusing on, it's not only about surviving your cancer, but how do you make sure that, we call it survivorship, what does your life look like after cancer? So let's take a child, for example, that gets flooded with chemo across all of their cells. There's things like, say, a young girl, she may not be able to have children.
Yeah, okay.
The investment that we're doing into research around targeted therapies, that means that they're actually targeting the cancer cells only, but leaving all the good cells.
Yeah.
Let's just target the cancer cells. It means the impact that has on them after is so much less, so they have a greater quality of life post their cancer. And the research and the researchers here in South Australia are just absolutely amazing. And the outcomes are so different to what they were 2, 3, 4, 30 years ago. So we've got to keep doing that. And then caring for people that have cancer, which is what we spoke about before through all of the services that we offer. But
amazing work you got. You had a scare recently too, didn't you? I think, which is a powerful story. Are you open to sharing that?
So I noticed a mark on my leg, and when I went and had my skin check, I said, "Oh, can you just check this mark out?" And it didn't show any of the characteristics of anything sinister. And so we measured it and we said that we would just keep an eye on it. When I went to my GP, I thought, I'll just check with him as well. And I said, what do you think of this? And he goes, it doesn't have any of the characteristics. It's fine. Went back to my skin specialist for my next routine check. And I said, it's still on my leg. And he goes, it still doesn't have any of the characteristics. I'm actually happy to monitor it. And about 2 weeks after that, I was sitting in my office and I distinctly remember sitting there and I could just feel it. And I just couldn't take my eyes off of it. And I was looking at it again and it was different. The main thing was it was a different colour to all my other freckles. It was tiny, tiny, tiny. And I rang. I thought, do you know what? I'm going to actually take the time and I'm going to ring. I was so busy.
Was this while you're working at Cancer Council?
Yeah.
So your senses are heightened as well, right?
And so I thought, well, I'm going to ring. And I made an appointment and went back to see him 3 weeks after I'd seen him. And he said, well, what are you doing here? I said, can you just take it off? I just don't, this doesn't feel right. And he said, sure, absolutely. We'll take it off and we'll send it off for pathology. And he rang me on the Saturday and I was getting ready to go to a day on the green with some girlfriends. And I was rushing to go out and he said, it's such and such here. I just need to let you know that that's a melanoma on your leg. And he said, it didn't show any of the characteristics. But what my learning out of this is that you felt something. And I got to listen more to that because you felt something, because you'd asked me about this a couple of times. I need you to come back on Monday and we're going to take the margin. So from this tiny little freckle, I've got this, really big scar on my leg where they had to take all of the margin out around. And thankfully they got all of it. And, I'm really lucky that I persisted.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah, so
I think it's an important lesson. I mean, I'm going through a family situation at the moment. My father-in-law's got stage 4 melanoma. So he was one of those people that, she'll be right. And I kind of call that the ostrich effect in a way. People, and this happens in business and in life, that when we don't want to know the answer to something, we just stick our head in the sand and we're scared of what the outcome could be. But yet, the outcome's going to happen anyway, even though it just doesn't make sense.
But the big strong message is the earlier that you pick it up,
absolutely,
the more likely you are to survive. So
you might waste a little bit of time, but at least you're alive. You know what I mean?
People are scared. So and you're right. While I don't know, it's not real. It's not happening. But the problem is, the longer that you take to go and seek to see if something is going on, means more advanced the cancer can be. Because a lot of cancers can be cured. Yeah,
absolutely. We had, and you know him quite well, Andrew Bills, the CEO of SAPN, on the show, and he caught his, I think he had prostate, that's it, I had lost the word for a sec. He had prostate cancer, and he just, thankfully, what's interesting is that his father died at quite a young age from issues, and which Andrew then became obsessed with health, and then went and got a yearly checkup or a 6-monthly checkup or whatever it was, and it was his learnings from his father that actually saved his life. In the token that he was getting these regular checkups, and his PSA levels went up, and then they said, actually, let's check that further. And then they got it really early, right? So just the regular checkups are super important. I think we could put a call out to everyone last time when he was on the show, to go and get checked. And I now go every 6 months as well. And I guess I'll stress that again. Just keep
know yourself.
Yeah.
Yourself and get checked.
Yeah.
And Andrew's story is really interesting because that was through an employee wellness program.
Yeah, it was.
He signed off.
Yeah.
So
saved his life.
And he's very generous in sharing his story around his experience to try and make men talk about it and, as you said, get checked.
Yeah, let's not make it taboo. It doesn't need to be. Excellent. Now, I'm conscious of time. We've been talking for quite some time here, which has been great. I guess if I just want one last question on leadership. I think it's a world in which you're passionate about before we kick into some closing thoughts and quick fire questions. And if you were to look back at your career and, compile all the lessons that you've learned around leadership over the years, and you sit back and reflect, and you said that you have adapted to new roles and all the above, what would be one or two of the core lessons that you've learned along the way?
Take people on the journey with you. Be open, be transparent, value other people's perspectives, actively listen, seek to understand. You're going to get a better outcome if you take on board what other people's views are than trying to do it alone. And you're going to get greater buy-in and ownership when you get to the end. That's probably the key one that I've learned.
Beautiful. Wonderful. And if you could encapsulate your entire journey to date with a single lesson or a message, what would that be?
Say yes.
Say yes and figure it out later. That's the Richard Branson?
Say yes. Even when you're scared, say yes. Lean in. Don't lean out, because you don't know where it's going to take you. You don't know what you're going to learn, and you don't know where it's going to take you. I know so many people that said, I'm going to go down this path. I mean, I'm a trained accountant, right? And I ended up leading customer divisions, doing digital transformation, doing change, and now CEO. Just say yes, because your path doesn't have to be defined from day one.
Yeah.
It can go in so many different directions. And don't worry if you don't know everything. And it's okay to be a little bit scared, because you generally know more than what you think you know.
Yeah. I have a general rule on that, which is if I'm feeling comfortable, it means I'm not challenging myself enough, right? Like you
want the
Yeah.
the butterfly feelings and feel a bit anxious.
Yeah, it's the stepping into ambiguity is where real growth and learning.
But trust yourself.
Yeah, on top of that.
Yeah.
Very good. Right, we're going to jump into some quick fire questions
Okay.
to round off. Some just quick ones. Sometimes we go through them quickly. Sometimes we dive into them because I get really intrigued by some of the answers. We're big readers here. We're always, the core value of SynergyIQ is wisdom. So what are you reading right now?
Okay, so I've got, I'm part of a book club with my girlfriends, and a few of them I went to high school with, if you can believe that.
Still, yeah.
So we meet once a month. We're reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which is an amazing book.
Yeah, amazing.
Twists and turns and unexpected.
Beautiful. Is there any book, podcast, TED Talk, YouTube video, whatever it might be, from a learning perspective, so non-fiction, self-development perspective, that has stood out to you over the years or that you've recommended more often than not?
Not one in particular. Probably I don't generally read self-development books because I try and keep my reading to my downtime relaxation. But I do quite enjoy reading articles and listening to TED Talks about particular topics. So I will generally go in and do it on a particular topic. So there's not one that jumps to mind. I'm normally doing it topic specific, and then I'll jump around a little bit because I like to hear a diverse range of perspectives. And then I bring it all together myself.
Yeah. And then you come up with your own judgment out of it. Perfect. That's the way you should learn, right?
Yeah.
You just take what someone says and do it. You do what works best for you and your business. What's one lesson that's taken you the longest to learn?
That I'm not always right.
Yeah, I don't reckon we'll ever learn that.
That I nailed it. I try really hard.
If you could have coffee with one current or historical figure, who would that be?
I'll share two if I may.
Go for it.
I had the privilege of having coffee with Marjorie Jackson Nelson this week, and she is one of the most fascinating women that I've met. She's 92 and her life experiences, I'm just blown away.
Yeah.
But she was talking to me this week about her interactions with the Queen, and she was just laughing and talking about how down to earth and the sense of humour that the Queen had. And I think we saw little glimpses of that every now and then, but I would love to have a chat with her and see if I can crack her and see what her sense of humour is about, because she lived a life in limelight, which is tough.
A long life in the limelight. Yeah, wasn't it? Very good. What's some of the best advice that you've ever received?
The best advice that I've ever received is trust yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can do whatever you put your mind to, and I think that comes right back to what we started talking about, was my mum and, you know.
There was no boundaries for you.
Yeah, no boundaries. Just trust yourself. You can do it.
Yeah.
Don't even...
Because there's no other choice. You have to do it.
That's exactly right.
So what's one habit that holds you back the most?
A habit that holds me back? Probably from a time perspective, I'm the organiser. So at work, you know, leading a large organisation, but in my friend group, in my family group, yeah, but we're going to do this, so I'll organise it, and I just kind of get a bit stuck at times. So I've tried to step back out of that.
Yeah.
So my habit was just taking control, but I'm like, other people can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they do a good job.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy it.
Yeah. And again, it's just sometimes the ambiguity of stepping into what someone else has organised is actually quite more refreshing than you trying to control everything and then hope everything goes okay.
The pressure.
Yeah.
You know, what happens if this goes wrong now? I'm just like, that, you know, you'll be right.
I'm just going to enjoy my wine.
That's it.
What's your biggest pet peeve? Like, what pisses you off the most?
Undermining and non-transparent behaviour. Bring it to the surface. Have the conversation.
Yeah.
I can't stand it.
Yeah, it's toxic.
I don't.
And you don't tolerate it either.
Tolerate it at all.
That's one thing I remember about you was
I'll call it out. Bring it to the surface.
Yeah. Character is a huge thing in that. If you could have one person that could do one of your chores for the rest of your days, what would it be? What chore would it be?
I've got two already. Do they count?
You go for it.
My cleaning lady and my ironing lady.
Oh, yeah.
I love them both.
Yeah. Yeah. Who wants to iron?
Who wants to iron?
No.
Nobody wants to iron.
No, it's ridiculous. I shouldn't say this. People are going to hold it against me. But this one's not actually, but some of the shirts that I wear, I buy the non-iron ones, and you hang them out on a coat hanger, and they you don't have to iron them. It's fabulous.
I have an amazing lady that comes to my house on a Monday morning, picks up a basket, and drops it back Tuesday morning.
Yeah, brilliant.
She's one of my favourite people in the world.
Yeah, I have my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law loves ironing.
Yeah.
And so she comes, she'll help us picking up the kids from school, and she'll come home and do our ironing. I know. It's like,
it's amazing.
What a human. What's one word that you absolutely hate?
We can't do that. Can't. Can't.
Yeah, there's no such.
Yeah, we can. We just got to work out how to.
Yeah. As one of the lessons that my parents taught me growing up, that was the one thing that they drummed into my head more than anything else, is there is no such word as can't.
So I banned at one of the steering committees that I led, I banned the word no.
Yeah.
They were not allowed to come in and say no. They're looking at me like I was some crazy lady.
100%.
And then it changed their whole mindset. So the project went from not progressing to progressing because they worked out how to do it. I
heard a really good quote once, which was like, it was a story. It was a leader, and he said, I came in and I had this idea, and then one of the replies I got, well, I can give you 10 reasons why that won't work. He's like, well, all you need is one reason why it won't work, and that's enough. I don't need the 10. I need one, but can you figure out how we can make it work, right? That's the important bit. Don't sit here and just throw shit at me. This is what we need to do. What's the first thing that you would do if you became invisible? It's a bit of a creepy question.
I'd probably just annoy people.
Yeah, poke and prod.
Things around, so
freak them out a bit.
That kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of my character as well.
Yeah. Yeah, goes back to your early years. Yeah. What's the most useless talent that you have?
All right, are you ready for it?
Go.
The top of my finger can move by itself.
Oh, what?
Completely useless talent.
That's alien-like. Tell us, this is my favourite question of the whole podcast. What's your best mum/dad shit joke?
Are you ready for it?
I am ready. I've been ready since we started. You told me you had a good one when you walked in.
It's not a good one. You need to bring your expectations down a little bit.
But a good one means a shit one, right?
Okay, you ready for it?
Go.
What do you call a magician who has lost his magic?
What do you call a magician who's lost his magic?
Ian.
A magician. You're very good.
That's as good as it gets. I'm sorry.
Well done. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Kerry. It's been amazing having you on. as a little bit of a trip down memory lane for me in some aspects as well. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for everything that you and the team at Cancer Council are doing in South Australia and Australia-wide. Your cause is paramount to the health of South Australians. From my understanding, it's like 30 South Australians a month, is it? Or a year? No, a month, a day. A day, 30,000.
30 South Australians every day die with cancer.
That is
30 a day.
That is scary. And then you think, you times that by X% on Australian-wide and worldwide. So we need organisations like yours to help with the research and not to mention the screening and early intervention and everything else that you do. So I'm going to call out again to the corporates, if there is an opportunity to help out a little bit, then please reach out. It's super important. So, but yes, just wanted to say thanks again.
No, thanks for having. I really enjoyed my morning. Really appreciate it.
Beautiful. That's it from us, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to the podcast. All you can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you, and find out more about us at SynergyIQ.com.au. I am going to ask though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.